When I was a little girl, my grandfather used to grow tomatoes in our backyard. I always wondered at this, how you could plant a seed or get a smaller plant from a garden center, put it in your soil, and in a couple of months, a whole vine of tomatoes would grow. Ever since then, and especially after the passing of my grandfather in 2015, I always desired to have my own vegetable garden, and whenever I would see a tomato, I would think of him. My mom was a little bit against the idea because behind our backyard, there was a golf course, and they would use pesticides to obviously keep the grass clean and kept, and she was a little bit afraid of runoff that would come into our soil and ultimately harm the vegetables and harm us if we were to eat the vegetables. A couple years ago, the golf course actually shut down, and this was extremely exciting because it opened up realms of possibilities for our community to have this beautiful area now as a park, and for me to finally have my vegetable garden. One winter day in 2021, I found myself, like many others might relate to this, but I found myself in a deep, deep hole of YouTube, gardening YouTube to be specific. And I came across this method called winter sowing, where you basically make mini greenhouses out of old juice jugs, juice bottles, milk jugs, any clear jug. You reuse it by basically putting soil, planting some seeds, covering it up with tape, and putting it outside in the middle of winter. And over the course of a couple months, the seed will sprout and begin to grow. I was so amazed by this new discovery that I just had to try it. About 15 years ago, my mom took this little piece of our garden and turned it into a place for me and my sister, and it was our secret garden. She planted flowers and she put mini stones inside the garden so we could have a secret passageway to walk through, and it was amazing. I miss that so much. Unfortunately, over the years, things got busier. My mom had another child, and you know how life goes. So the garden was neglected. Many weeds came in. A random fruit vine took over. A tree that nobody planted actually started growing, which I thought was quite amazing. The fruit vine, though, started to attach itself to the tree, so I had to clip all of that off. So this is almost about 15 years of overgrowth that I decided that I wanted to clean up, and I wanted to restore the garden for my mom and my family so that we could have once again, another beautiful place to relax in our backyard. I remember when my mom was actually making the garden. One day I went outside to help her, and by accident I fell face first into the soil. And I remember storming off, and I promised myself I'm never going to help with garden work ever again. And literally from that day, I haven't really done much gardening until last year, because I was just so upset over that. Working on this garden was hard work, but I loved every single second of it. I remember in the earlier months when it was too cold to start planting or digging, I would sit in my living room window and I would stare outside in the backyard and plan how I would want the garden to be. I would do countless research of the flowers I wanted, and my imagination would just run wild with excitement about this garden that I was planting or I was restoring. Finally, when the weather was warm enough and garden centers started supplying roses and hydrangeas, I went there immediately and picked out all my favorite colors. And my mom actually came along with me, and helped me find the blue hydrangeas that I really, really wanted and that she really wanted because her favorite color is actually blue. I even found this rose called Moody Blue, which I don't think there's any real blue roses, but my mom actually had blue roses for her wedding. And Moody Blue was the closest that I could get to blue roses. And even if they don't come out, well, they didn't really come out quite blue, but the name is special to me. Not only was this a physical experience, but I found myself meditating a lot while creating this place. And I learned so much about myself, about God, about creation and nature and how delicate nature is. But one thing I found really amazing is that plants want to grow and they'll do whatever it takes to grow. Like they do not give up easily. Even weeds, when weeds are attacking them and like the vine was attacking the tree, it still tried to grow. Plants want to live, just like we want to live, to survive. We'll do anything to survive almost, and especially during this pandemic, which it's been very hard for a lot of us. We survived, and we're surviving despite the pandemic, despite the mental issues it has brought and social issues and even financial issues. We're still surviving, and I think it's amazing and wonderful that we keep on surviving despite the hardships and despite the invasive vines that are trying to suffocate us. Having good ground is extremely important. Before putting my good soil, there was so much clay, natural clay soil that was in the ground, and it was extremely hard to dig out. But the worst part about it was the weeds. The weed roots were so attached to that clay soil. It was almost impossible getting some of these weeds out. But when I put down the good soil, and now that I have to do some regular weeding, the weeds are so much easier to pull out. This just reminds me of the parable of the different heart conditions. There's the stony, there's by the wayside, and there's the thorny, and finally there's the good ground. The good ground is the soil that's nutritious, that's airy, that isn't polluted, where things are able to grow and thrive. And what I learned is that even if something harmful gets in the soil, it's so much easier to pull out of good soil than that rocky, clay-like soil. Unfortunately, tomatoes were not the best option for winter sowing because tomatoes aren't as cold hardy as lettuce and spinach. So I was unable to start my tomatoes early in the winter, but I do plan on planting some mini plants soon, as it is now June while I'm recording this voice message. I think one of the most rewarding parts about all of this was the veggies. Being able to pick your own vegetables. And though I only had a small harvest this year because I didn't plant too much, I was using this year almost as a trial run. It felt so good to just go outside and pick a spinach leaf and eat it. And the lettuce and spinach actually got so big. I was able to pull out the lettuce and gift it to some friends, and it just felt so good doing that. And I hope to be able to grow more next year so I can share it with my community and my loved ones. One really amazing thing this year was that spring actually came a little bit early. So my flowers were able to bloom much earlier. And I think this was probably my favorite part of everything. When I saw that this actually worked, that I actually planted this right, I actually planted these roses right, I actually planted these hydrangeas right. I was nervous for a second because my hydrangeas were almost wilting, but then they flowered and I was just like, it worked. I can't believe this actually worked. When my roses started blooming along with my neighbors, I was just like, I did it. I actually did it. This secret garden is nowhere near perfect. There's a lot more flowers I like to add. There's a lot of weeding I have to do. It needs a couple more white stones to complete it. But I love this secret garden. And I'm so proud of myself. Being an artist, I just saw this as being a part of my practice. Everything in my life that I do and that I put my mind to has now just become a part of my practice, and self-evaluation and finding out who I am and why I want to do this and why this brings me joy or why this doesn't. And I'm just so glad I did this, and I'm so glad to share it with my family, my mom, my sister, my brother, my dad. And soon I can't wait to share it with my friends. As a wise man once said, let us cultivate our garden.